Thank you, Ranking Member. I want to thank the members for their amazing testimony today. And I agree with the Ranking Member. I think there's a lot of good stuff, especially in these opening statements from every witness on what we can do from a legislation standpoint. And I'll look forward to working with the Ranking Member to put some of that to pen to paper and get something done. As we've heard from our witnesses, the threats posed by the Iranian regime remain significant to the United States homeland and our allies like Israel. The regime is the world's worst state sponsor of terrorism, utilizing its surrogates like Hezbollah and other terrorist proxies to conduct nefarious activities. The regime remains committed to develop proxy networks inside the homeland, which should concern us all. Mr. Warwick mentioned that the Iranian regime has not effectively connected with the drug cartels yet. They failed in their efforts, as I understood, but his implication of that is because of that, it shouldn't be a concern for us. I think that's foolhardy. Iran hasn't dropped a nuclear device into the United States, has not used a nuclear device in the United States. Because of that, that doesn't give us an excuse to just write off that as a threat, because it hasn't been done yet. I think that reasoning is flawed. I believe that our open southern border, coupled with the threats from abroad and from within, are a significant concern. In fact, I think they're a significant national security threat. Mr. Warwick also mentioned that the greater threat is from recruitment inside the United States, and I don't necessarily disagree with that statement. And you can look at our college campuses in the past week since this attack, and it looks like there's a pretty large pool of people to recruit from. That is also concerning to me, and I appreciated your testimony on that. I want to talk a little bit about policy for just a second, because we talk about how policy doesn't have an impact. If you give $6 billion to a terrorist regime, and then it's supposed to be humanitarian, we've got all these guarantees that it's humanitarian, and then a couple of days after the transaction, the very president, the leader, the supreme leader of Iran says, well, we'll use that for whatever we want, and then you don't take it back, then, that emboldens enemies. And, you take, for example, the insistence on the JCPOA just continuing to negotiate this deal with Iran, who really, from my perspective, has been an enemy since '79 in the United States, when they took Americans and held them hostage for 444 days. Unbelievable. The Khobar Towers, the Beirut bombing, we just recently, I think, celebrated, it was the 40th anniversary of those Marines who died. All of that, Hezbollah, Iranian-backed proxies, you can't turn a blind eye to that and go cut a deal with somebody, because it does nothing but embolden them. A lot like the way we withdrew from Afghanistan, I believe emboldened Vladimir Putin to think that he could get away with invading Ukraine. Weakness is like it's provocation. It's like slapping your enemy in the face. And that's what I see from the policies of this administration, and I have to call it out. I'd be irresponsible if I didn't. We've also heard today from Ms. Alinejad that Tehran continues to target current and former U.S. government officials, dissidents, journalists right here in our country, and this is unacceptable. Additionally, we have to secure our southwest border. As I've said, there's no doubt that the regime and its terrorist proxies could exploit the glaring vulnerabilities there. We know for a fact we've caught terrorists trying to get through, and that number has exponentially grown. Are we to expect that the terrorists are intentionally going only to the crossing sites to get caught? That's defies logic. In that 1.7 million gotaways, let's say it's just the same percentage. That's still one too many. We've got to secure our southwest border if we want to protect America. And I appreciated the comments about cyber. One of the initiatives we've taken is to try to get to a whole of government approach on cyber. I formed, with the approval of then Speaker McCarthy, to have all of the cyber subcommittees come together in a quarterly meeting. We've passed cyber legislation here. Our cyber subcommittee, led by Mr. Garbarino, has done some amazing work. And I agree, our cyber border is just as vulnerable and just as important as our southwest border. That cyber subcommittee is tackling the issue of workforce. We're 500,000 jobs short in cybersecurity. I noted some other recommendations in here on cybersecurity, and we're going to take those and go forward with them. And I appreciate the witnesses bringing that up. But we've got to remain vigilant to counter all of the threats, not just the cyber threats, but also the southwest border and the threats from folks being recruited here in the United States. I couldn't agree more. I too want to say to the U.S. members of the Jewish community, we will fight anti-Semitism with our last breath. And it should not and it ever be tolerated. And the members of Congress who are reticent or whatever it is to sign on to a resolution condemning Hamas, I cannot make an excuse for that. It is inconceivable to me. The members of this committee may have some additional questions for the witnesses that they will submit in writing, and the witnesses have 10 days in accordance with our rule, Committee Rule 7D, to get that back to us and into the record. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.